So Cyberpunk 2077 is a very interesting game on the Nintendo Switch 2 because still to this day, despite it being 5 years old at this point, it's still one of the more better looking games across PlayStation, Xbox, PC, despite it being older. Now, nobody's really expecting the Nintendo Switch 2 to be able to hit the levels of the PC platform at the highest spec, or even the PlayStation 5. But what we've seen here is that we've got new footage that's absolutely making people lose their minds on both sides of the fence. People that are kind of like Switch 2 can't do this or that, or it's not good. And then of course the people that are very positive about the Nintendo Switch 2. So there's been a lot of different videos and comparisons and things, and I wanted to kind of let things settle a little bit and go through everything, watch a lot of footage of the new Cyberpunk gameplay, which was direct feed footage, by the way, that we got from a channel, like 40 minutes or so. Gamers have been giving their opinion, but then there's also been comparisons done by people who are saying, okay, well, Steam Deck is still better, or this and that. So what I wanted to do is go over the collective mind share of some people that are losing their minds and other people that are kind of responding to the situation that we have here with Cyberpunk 2077, which is going to be a launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2. It's going to include the Phantom Liberty DLC, which was not included on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of the game, and it's going to have all of the updates and patches up to this point on a full 64 gigabyte cartridge on the Nintendo Switch 2. So it's a pretty compelling package overall, and it's shooting out to be probably one of the better selling games for the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, considering everything that it's doing and the type of value and content that you get out of it with that Phantom Liberty and all the different content that's already in there, and the amount of time and attention and detail that they've put into it based off of this new footage. Now, Blunty, who is a YouTuber who's covering a lot of Cyberpunk 2077, he's doing a lot of comparisons and graphics looks and certain things like that. And so recently, there's been a lot of people that have talked about, okay, well, how does this version stack up to the Steam Deck version of the game? Because there's still some people who maybe feel the Steam Deck version is better. So Blunty came out and said, okay, let's do a comparison as close as we can to it, and it showed that the Nintendo Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077 is definitely considerably better than the Steam Deck version. Now, it's not like a, oh my gosh, it's like night and day difference. It's still the same game, but you can clearly tell that the textures look better, the color looks better, everything just looks better overall on the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game, which to me should be expected considering the Nintendo Switch 2 is a lot newer. It's using DLSS. There's some really good technology packed into the Nintendo Switch 2 for future-proofing a bit, because they didn't want the same thing to happen that happened with the Nintendo Switch 1. So that's what we're seeing right now. The Nintendo Switch 2, even though there's comparisons to the PlayStation 5 and people are talking about, wow, it looks pretty similar and all that, clearly the Nintendo Switch 2 is not up to the level, power and specs-wise, of the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X, and in some respects it could beat out the Xbox Series S in some things, but not everything overall. So we have to also make sure that we kind of lower just the temperature just a bit. But what I will say is that for a hybrid platform, overall a hybrid platform, because that's what's important about the Nintendo Switch 2, and that's one of the big reasons why it's going to do so well, is because it's a seamless hybrid. Not just a, okay, you can dock it, then get the same performance, but it's a seamless, real hybrid of different settings and power in dock mode compared to portable mode, and the features that are available for developers to implement. That is one of the big reasons, along with all of the great first-party support and some cool stuff like we're seeing right here, is why the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to do so well. And this Cyberpunk footage that we got just pretty much doubles down and reassures what I've thought about this platform, is that it's going to be a good platform for developers that want to be able to have games being played anywhere. More access equals more time, which potentially equals more money and more functionality. So that's why it's a good idea to support the Nintendo Switch 2, and that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of developers really support the Nintendo Switch 2, coming off the heels of the 150 million plus selling Nintendo Switch 1. They want to be on the ground floor, they want to be ready to go, and they want to make sure that they get their games on the platform and get roots into the community and into the fan base so it can grow into something bigger and better. Because you have to remember, the decline of the Xbox Series has been a thing. So really, when it comes to dedicated home consoles or the dedicated market, really there's only PlayStation doing really well alongside the really old Nintendo Switch 1 at this point. So this is the next thing to replace the Nintendo Switch 1 and potentially become a primary partner, like we talked about in a recent video that FDC Intelligence talked about, for third-party developers, because the decline of the Xbox Series is a real thing. They're just not selling enough systems. Third-party developers need a place to where they can get a large install base to sell their games like they have on PlayStation and like they've traditionally had before with Xbox, with 80-something million on the Xbox 360, almost 60 million on the Xbox One. It's cut to about half of that with about 30 million or so. So that's definitely not good. So Switch has kind of taken up that mantle a little bit, and the Switch 2 can really come in and be a benefit overall to third-party developers, and having a game like Cyberpunk 2077 look and run as good as it does, considering the circumstances of a hybrid platform, is definitely a good thing, and something that, once again, this footage shows that more developers can probably put out some awesome, incredible experiences on the platform, because a lot of developers aren't going to have graphics and aren't going to have a game as intense as Cyberpunk running overall, despite it being 5 years old. So we can see some pretty incredible things overall on the Nintendo Switch 2. Blunty did compare the Steam Deck footage to the Nintendo Switch 2 footage, and once again, it just shows that the Nintendo Switch 2 is above it, and from a picture quality standpoint to the naked eye, looks pretty similar, but overall, PS5 version is definitely better. But I still feel that, considering everything, like I said, with the hybrid platform, this is definitely a good look. Considering if you took, like, let's just say Doom 2016 on the Nintendo Switch 1 and compare that to the PlayStation 4 version of the game, yeah, it's not even going to look anywhere near close. It's not even going to be as close as we see with Cyberpunk on the Nintendo Switch 2 compared to Xbox Series or compared to other platforms. So that's the positive thing about the Nintendo Switch 2. And the DLSS, it's doing its magic, it's doing its work overall. But I think some of you guys do your work overall, and make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Also, make sure you hit that like button and click that notification bell to get my vids as soon as they drop. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing here. And we're going to be talking about Nintendo and game key cards. Now, you guys already know how I feel, but if you don't know how I feel, I'm not a huge fan of game key cards. Now, and I understand why they're here. I get it, because I covered the Nintendo Switch 1 extensively, and game cards, or game key cards, I should say more like it, didn't start with the Nintendo Switch 2. They actually started with the Nintendo Switch 1. It's just that a lot of developers were able to nuke their resolutions, nuke their textures, and do things to fit games on a 16 gigabyte cartridge or even a smaller cartridge. So for example, Dark Souls Remastered, that was fit on a 4 gigabyte cartridge because they did not want to pay for the 8 gigabyte cartridge overall, and it looked and sounded worse than the PlayStation and Xbox versions, and kind of was like worse or almost on par with the 360 version. So there's limitations when it comes to using these smaller file sizes. With the Nintendo Switch 2, despite there being some games that obviously should fit on a smaller cart if Nintendo provided those, we still have not full clarification on that. But a lot of developers aren't going to use that 32 gigabyte cartridge if there even was one, because they didn't do it on Nintendo Switch 1. And they're not going to pay for that 64 gigabyte cartridge either. So I understand the dynamics, don't like it, but I understand. But Nintendo has came out and stated that, look, we're not going to be using game key cards for the Nintendo Switch 2 with their games. They had this to say, and they were pretty straightforward overall, saying, quote, "We currently have no plans to use game key cards for Nintendo developed titles." So there you have it right there. Some people will maybe worried, like, okay, well, a lot of these third-party developers are using these game key cards and it doesn't actually have the game on there. Like, I still have to go on the internet and download the game or something. And that's been a lot of backlash from fans out there, physical collectors and everything. But with Nintendo's first party games, you don't have to worry about that. And they've got a lot of first party games launching this year in 2025. Like I said, I'm not a fan of game key cards overall. I like to have the actual game on the cartridge. I think it works better for everyone involved. But once again, if the rumors are true when it comes to the 64 gigabyte cartridges, as those being the only ones for the most part, and I would even say, even if there was 32 gigabyte cartridges, I don't think developers would even use those, because how many developers use those on the Nintendo Switch 1? Those still aren't cheap. So even if Nintendo had them, I don't think many developers would use those either, considering we have so few games on the Nintendo Switch 1 that actually used a 32GB cartridge. Most developers said, nah, we're good. And even some of them, they said, nah, we're good when it comes to the West. So for example, like Final Fantasy X/10-2, that was a 32GB cartridge in Japan, or the Asian version, but for the West, it was a download code for the second game, and then Final Fantasy X was, I think, on the cartridge. So even then, you had some developers just cheaping out or not using it at all. Heck, Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2 never got localized on that 32GB cartridge for the Nintendo Switch 1. So very unfortunate, but at least we can count on Nintendo overall to make sure that they have their games on a cartridge for the most part, which kind of goes to show you, in my opinion at least, people talk about whose fault it is and try to lay blame. And yeah, third-party developers obviously wanted this. Clearly, that's what they wanted to do. They saw the prices going up. They saw it on Nintendo Switch 1. A lot of them did download code in a box or did a game key card, but the Nintendo Switch 1 version of that, Hogwarts Legacy, was a game key card. It's a game key card again on the Nintendo Switch 2. So it's one of those things to where it's unfortunate. Don't like it at all. I do think that potentially maybe prices can go down. We've got to wait and see what other developers do. If they see the sales for Cyberpunk and games like Guardians of Azuma and Daemon X Machina, Titanic Scion, they see those games in terms of it do really well, they're physical on the cartridge, I think that that could get other developers to say, okay, here we go. Nintendo Switch 2 owners, they're buying the physical game, they're paying a bit more, whatever the case is, so we're going to also do that as well. So we'll see what happens in the future in terms of how they get those cart sizes sorted out, in addition to other developers seeing the success of other games that are fully on a cartridge. So what do you guys think about what Nintendo had to say about game key cards and their own games not using them? You can let me know in the comment section. But now we're going to move on to some more kind of upsetting news here, guys, because Chrono Trigger, we got to talk about this because this was a saga with Chrono Trigger. First, okay, Square Enix, they're working on Chrono Trigger. Yuji Horii says Chrono Trigger is back on. We're considering it. We're going to do it at this point. And then, no, it was a mistranslation, but I'm considering it. And then now again, another mistranslation. He never said that. So this has just been a really weird situation with Chrono Trigger. So this was at the Comic-Con Napoli 2025 where all that happened before. But now Square Enix has came out and said this, quote, "The remake version of Chrono Trigger is a mistranslation. Mr. Horii did not make such statements at all." So he's not considering it. He didn't make it at first. It's not happening for right now. At least if it is happening, they're not talking about it right now. So I still feel that the Nintendo Switch 2, I still feel that Square Enix, with what they've done before in the past and kind of how they're restructuring right now, is a bad time overall because of everything that's going on. But I do feel that eventually they will get to Chrono Trigger. They will get to remaking or re-releasing this game. I think that they want to clear out Dragon Quest. They had a huge success with Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake. They're going to have another success with Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. Get those big games out of the way, then you can have some resources and a team to get ready to make Chrono Trigger HD 2D Remake, which I think if they are going to remake the game or re-release it, it's going to be in some type of HD 2D form. Now, they could just release like a ROM on NSO or just like a ROM to download and do it that way, and that would be fine too. The game still holds up. The original version is great. They can take that PC version and just port it over to modern consoles, and I think that would do fine as well. So I think one of the two will happen at some point. We're going to get either a port of the game from the PC that has all the updated features and everything that we know and love about Chrono Trigger, or we're going to get a full HD 2D remake of the game so they can sell it for 60 bucks, maybe even more, when it comes to like the complete or special edition or something like that, or a collector's edition. They can sell it for even more and fans can buy that. So I do think that that's probably going to happen in the future, but just for right now, there's not really anything to announce. So what do you guys think about the news when it comes to Chrono Trigger? Let me know in the comment section below. But let's go to a game that's actually real and is doing incredibly well. Konami has talked about Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remaster sales are strong, and this is something that I'm very happy about because I didn't know how this was going to do. Suikoden, it's one of those old school games. It's from the PlayStation 1 era. Will people go out there and pick this one up? But once I saw people buying it on Amazon and people being excited about it when it comes to the eShop sales and other platforms, I was like, all right, this is probably going to do pretty well. And now we have confirmation about that the sales are good. Now, Konami talked about this in a recent Suikoden live broadcast where they stated that this collection of games, where they stated that the sales are, quote, extremely strong. So whatever their internal sales targets are or where their projections were for a certain amount of time on the market, they're definitely hitting that and exceeding it. So I don't think that the expectations were super high for this type of game. Maybe it was like 250,000 to 500,000 units, something like that, because it's an old school classic brought back. So I'm guessing it's somewhere around there, 500,000, 250,000, somewhere in that range. And once again, that's just a guess, not saying that I actually know the numbers, but that's pretty good. That's pretty good for this type of game, and I'd expect them to continue with more Suikoden because of these sales overall. That's what you want to see, and hopefully eventually a brand new non-mobile Suikoden game, because I think there's a new Suikoden mobile game, but I would definitely love to see something on the Nintendo Switch 2, Xbox, PlayStation, PC, something new. Takes a lot of the elements from previous Suikoden games, adds in some new elements as well, and kind of puts it together for a new game in the series after so long. So I think that would be great, but this is a really good start for Suikoden and Konami, and this is what you want to hear so they can continue this franchise. So what do you guys think about everything that we talked about here for the Nintendo Switch 2 news and more? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.